Welcome to This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition. I'm Kent Justice. This podcast focuses on economic development in the River City and throughout our region. And we're diving back into a topic we've covered a little bit, transportation. We'll talk about the Port of Jacksonville and the announcement that Jacksport is going to host 2 cruise lines really got us into this. Joining us right now, our guest today, Julia Holden Davis from Gunster. And Julia, I know you're one of your specialties includes transportation. What else in your background that leans into this topic?
So transportation, but also construction, which is where I started and was the natural segue into transportation, because if we're going to move things, we've got to build something to move them on.
Yeah, and there's, as we've talked about, logistics in the area and whatever, we know even some construction is happening for warehousing and other things that connect to what's happening in our area. So Jacksonville recently expanding the port, and that's a little broader than what I just mentioned. Yes, adding a new major cruise line, deepening the shipping channel. There's been other developments. So what's currently driving, I guess, the growth that we see, the transformation? And has it already happened, or is it still happening for Jacksonville to become a transportation hub?
Yeah, I think Jacksonville is definitely a transportation hub, but I think Jacksonville has been smart, and it's been trying to be more of that hub for a long time. I think if you go back to even 2007, Jacksonville was saying that it wanted to be America's logistical center. And I think it's really focused on that, and because of that, we're seeing those successes now. So you see the port deepening and being able to take in additional ships. You see it being able to bring in additional companies that want to use this as their logistics headquarters. And I think that's really a sign of planning and implementation that's happened over the last 10 plus years.
One of the things we heard, we talk about deepening the harbor there, the channel. Even then it was like, well, but we think that there will be an impact. We think that larger ships will be able to come here. But there's some risk-taking that has to happen, and certainly you just mentioned going back to 2007, so if we're looking at 16, 17 years, it takes some time. It seems like that time and that investment so far has created the momentum that we're seeing now.
I think that's exactly right, and I think you partner what we're seeing on the port side with what we're seeing in terms of Jacksonville trying to develop itself, and I think it's a great pairing. It's an exciting pairing. And when you see excitement, when you see people wanting to show up and wanting to be here, it builds on itself.
So the other side of things, I guess, there are current or maybe potential legal or regulatory challenges because the stakeholders, as they dive into and they make their investments, I know that they're going to want to know, well, what kind of obstacles am I going to have to overcome?
Yeah, for sure there's regulatory challenges. If we're developing, we're going to deal with all of the regulation around construction and environment and all of that, but transportation itself is a regulated industry. And so for this sector, we're always concerned about regulations. How do we move things? What do our vehicles, whatever that might be, a ship, a rail car, a truck, what do they have to comply with? And as we're building and expanding, what do we need to be thoughtful about in terms of environment, in terms of climate change, or whatever you want to call it, certainly climate impact? All of those things are going to play into development.
Yeah, and back to that deepening the harbor. We certainly heard from Army Corps of Engineers on one side, St. John's Riverkeeper on another, and a lot of people saying, hey, if we do this, we just want to make sure that we're not harming the environment, harming this beautiful natural resource that we have.
That's right. It's part of what makes our community attractive, is where it is and how it looks. So keeping those things together is really important.
How do local business leaders prepare for or adapt or take advantage of some of the changes that are happening because of the growth?
I think there's several ways. I mean, partly with growth, with excitement comes all sorts of new opportunities. We've seen schools, we see new companies coming here. Companies show up, they bring people. People need places to live, places to shop, places to send their kids to school. There's opportunities in all of those pieces. But I think there's also opportunities to be clever and thoughtful about what this means. What kinds of opportunities are created because we've got different companies from other countries coming here and using this as their sort of first stop, if you will, when they get to the U.S. That creates opportunity. And then since we're dealing with regulated industry, technology, there's all sorts of places, I think, to be really thoughtful about what resources can we bring to help solve some of these problems. And the more people are here in that sector, the more of a market there is for those kinds of solutions.
Well, and I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to interject that I know as that growth happened, and we're looking at different markets within a sector that, hey, workforce needs to happen. So we see opportunities for the educational institutions to get behind that. We see even companies saying, hey, we want to train people in a different way or a more robust way. it seems like, again, back to that idea of momentum in the transportation industry, that Jacksonville's in a good place. Do you agree?
I do agree, very much.
So as we talk about taking advantage of some of the growth, what does the growth in transportation capability mean for Northeast Florida?
I think it means a couple things. The more that we're able to support in that, the more attractive we are to other places. And I think as long as Jacksonville kind of keeps focused on what makes it special now, what makes this a better port to come into than, say, some of the other ports, what makes it a more convenient port, if we can keep those things, then that growth just means we've opened up opportunities for more companies to come here, take advantage of that, and we can keep building on that. We just have to keep both things, I think, both things in mind. Keep the things that make us attractive and make sure we don't lose those as more people come in.
What's your view on the leadership at the Port of Jacksonville? And the reason I ask this because Eric Green has been the CEO for some years now and regularly says, Ken, I'd love for you to talk to somebody else about what we're doing. I'm going to stay behind the scenes. But Eric Green, the CEO, has a vision and certainly has we are moving forward. We are taking the steps to be even better and even more in demand and even better at delivering what we want to for the customers.
Yeah. I think when you look at what's happened the last couple of years, you see that vision, right? You see people that were being very thoughtful, thinking about not just how do we develop, but also how do we make sure we maintain things. So we want to develop in a way that says, we're going to have jobs for our workforce. We're going to have the existing jobs, and we're going to have new jobs. And I think if you look at the plans that they've put in place and how they've implemented that, we're seeing some of that come true. So I think it was the Stork that showed up last year. That was the first larger vessel taking advantage of it being, the depth being deeper. And so seeing those kinds of things, I think, says a lot about the thought and the strategy that leadership at the port has brought to play.
It's interesting. So in this last month, the terrible accident with the bridge up there in Baltimore, immediately I know that Jacksport was saying, okay, if there's a need, what do we do to be ready for that? Are there any sort of regulatory concerns when something like that happens, or do you have to kind of tear away the red tape and say, yes, we can have a ship come here instead of there and all those sorts of things? Yeah,
I do think we've actually had at least one ship come here from there. So definitely there's a concern with looking and making sure we can get vessels, get goods where they need to go. I think a lot of cooperation between different ports and making sure that happens in shipping lines, but I think we've been able to accommodate that. Not aware of a lot, but I do think some traffic has come here.
Yeah,
so.
and as much as anything, it was knowing that the logistics folks were saying, we're ready if we're needed.
That's right.
Maybe last thing, I'd love for you to cap this conversation for us. Based on what you're seeing, what kind of trends do you think we should predict for Jacksonville when it comes to growth in the transportation industry?
I think we're going to continue to see growth. I think there's commitment and investment both at the port, but we also have the airport putting in a new concourse. I think that's another piece that's important of this, right? We're setting ourselves up to be able to move cargo, move people, and as long as we keep doing that, and I think then add maybe more on the local side of, okay, we've got people here as well, we're going to need people to support all this. How do we make sure we're supporting the people that are here and the people that we want to come here? I think we'll keep growing.
And as we all know, Northeast Florida specifically, but Jacksonville, military present, you see, for instance, Mayport, you see that, hey, if we're going to add a ship to Homeport at Mayport, okay, we've got to be robust in the support services that are there. And it's not enough what we had before, we've got to. So you just take that lesson, I think, from even what the military does. And as we grow, there's going to be ancillary services that are absolutely vital for making it successful, right?
I think that's exactly right. And you can see some of those things happening with port adding cranes, for example, that are larger. Let them, to allow them to, again, access, load, unload larger vessels. All of those pieces are needed to make this happen.
I appreciate it. Gunster, working with several of the folks in the industry, is that right?
That's right.
How many clients? Or is it, hey, we can't tell you. We can't tell you. But there's a lot of folks who obviously depend on legal expertise for what they're trying to navigate.
Yep, that's absolutely right. And I think it's something that we really like doing, and the opportunity to work on some of these projects at the beginning when we're really trying to build something positive is great.
Yeah, it's got to be fun too. That
fun.
Challenge from right at the beginning. So appreciate your time. Julia Holden Davis, thanks so much for being here with us
Thanks
today.
so much for having me.
All right, so as you know, we are constantly working to bring more interviews for you like this, focused on economic growth in our region, and you're going to find more episodes right now, including on News4JAX Plus. Thanks for joining us for This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition.